I'm delighted to be joined, as I said there in my headlines, by Ian Blackford, who is the leader of the SNP in Westminster. Ian, a very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Alastair. Nice to be on with you.
I'm delighted to talk to you. Chatham House said last night of this Russia report, there's nothing new in it, but it is a sit-rep, a charter for action, as it were. What should the absolute priority of Her Majesty's government be?
Well, I think Chatham House are absolutely right. I think we've been asleep at the wheel. In many respects, there is no evidence of Russian interference in the Brexit referendum. But the point is, the reason that there is no evidence is because we haven't asked the questions. Government simply hasn't taken this seriously enough. And I think in many respects, we've focused on the democratic aspects, the impact on our democracy that has taken place over the course of the last few years. But in some respects, I think in the public discourse of this, we've ignored the wider issues about the impact of Russia, not just in our democracy, but right across our public life. The oligarchs that have made themselves in the UK.
Let me come to that, because that's my second point on the notes I've got, that the points I want to put to you. But no, you made a powerful point at the beginning, and I put this to one or two academic experts earlier on the programme as well. Who, in your view, Ian, told the spooks not to look too closely at Russia?
And I think the spooks would have taken the view that they don't want to get involved in politics, and I understand that. We've got to be very careful that we don't cross lines in doing this, Alastair. But it's right that government, and we have to do this on a cross-party basis, by the way, have got to be able to direct the agencies appropriately to keep us safe, and that's the priority. And of course, a lot of that's got to do with what we see happening on social media, and therefore there's a responsibility that the platform providers have as well. People have to be able to trust the news. They have to be able to trust what's happening with them. And we've made it far too easy, whether it's Russia or anyone else. And we shouldn't ignore, of course, what's happening with China and all of this as well. But government can't convince us that we can be kept safe and secure from interference. That's really the key point. And as parliamentarians and as governments, we've all got a responsibility that we tackle this appropriately. And if I may say so, Alastair, I think the committee has done an excellent job. And I want to commend the committee and all of the individuals that have been on that are fantastic public servants. And, you know, one of the things that does concern me sitting alongside this is the way that government is behaving. They've belittled the committee. We've had the situation where the Prime Minister has tried to parachute someone in to chair the committee. Most extraordinary that should take place. And of course, we've had the appointment of David Frost as the National Security Advisor, that even Theresa May has criticised that appointment. So there are worrying things going on in terms of how government sees the role of scrutiny in this regard, but also accepting its own responsibility to take its own actions to tackle some of the things that have been highlighted by this report.
The headline that got me, and you were beginning to go into this when I interrupted you with that question, and I wanted to hear your full answer, which you've now given, which is a very clear agenda for government. But you were just going on to influence. I mean, to me, reading the report last night, the real standout headlines within it were not Brexit or your own independent referendum. It was dirty money and influence, and the phrase that your colleague Stuart Hosey used about, you know, not money laundering, but a laundromat. Is that not the issue? I.e., the priority here is not so much for MI5, MI6 and GCHQ. It's the financial authorities and the police.
Of course it is. And we simply haven't taken tough enough action in this area. And actually, again, many of us in Parliament across party have been concerned about this. And in a previous Parliament, I worked together with the likes of Margaret Hodge and actually with Dominic Raab to try and deal with some of the excesses. We've had the Majinsky Act, which deals with human rights abuses. But one of the things, let me give you a specific Scottish angle to this. We have something called Scottish Limited Partnerships that were established, I think it was in 1908. They're very much light touch regulation, but we've created the circumstances that people can come in, can establish businesses under the capacity of the SLPs, and we've got very little scrutiny over them. And myself and my colleagues in the SNP have been asking the government for years to take action on this. And I remember a conversation with Boris Johnson, and he said to me, well, why doesn't the Scottish government legislate for this? And I had to tell him that these matters are reserved, they're not devolved. But we have been too slow to react to dirty money, to money laundering. And it's not just about the UK, it's about the lack of transparency that we have in some of the overseas territories around the world as well. We have to get tough on this.
Is there also, an argument, you're very clear on that about the money laundering, and it sounds to me as if we're at one on it. Is there merit also in considering a rewriting of the Official Secrets Act, a review of our security laws? Because, again, many experts are saying that our security laws as such have not been fit for purpose. Whatever the priorities of the intelligence services are, the actual laws are not fit for purpose and haven't been for years.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I've had a problem over the last few months as an ex-member of the Intelligence and Security Committee that because this report has been hidden away, and that's another aspect. The government didn't allow this to be published.
Why do you think that was, Ian? That remains a mystery to me.
It's a big question, and the committee highlighted this yesterday. The report was submitted on the 17th of October, and the government is supposed to take a maximum of 10 working days to clear the report.
But if it had come out, if it had hit the press and we'd all read it and it said, former Tory Foreign Secretary was given millions of pounds to do this, that and the other, and there were 14 Russian agents sitting in the ballot box in Edinburgh West and the rest of it, then you might understand why the government had put a blanket. But there was nothing there that made your jaw hit the ground. So why block it for so long?
Well, when you tell me, it's just bizarre. And as a consequence of that, we've had ridiculous speculation over the course of the last few months. And as someone, I wasn't involved in the whole report. I'd left the committee before the end of it. But I couldn't say anything until this report was in the public domain because I would have been in breach of the Official Secrets Act. Now, that's ridiculous that we can't have responsible dialogue. But the simple fact of the matter is you can't. So these things need to be reviewed so that we can behave in a responsible manner and recognise the threats that we face. It's not just from Russia, but from China, something else that we're woken up to. And, one of the things, often in Parliament, we're very good at talking about, as an example, genocide, about what's happened with the Holocaust, what happened with Srebrenica. We're actually not very good at looking at what's going on today, and in particular what's happening with the Uyghurs. It's absolutely shocking.
Well, absolutely, and not only the Uyghurs, and I'm not diminishing that for a moment. We've talked lengthily about it over the last couple of days. But the other point that was made very, very clear from various folk within the Intelligence community, to be fair, on the briefing was, OK, if you want to give a priority to Russia and maybe even China in the current climate, then within existing budgets, you've got to give less priority to Al-Qaeda, ISIS, continuing IRA, the extreme right. It is a question of priorities that are set by the Prime Minister and set by the Foreign Secretary. Which goes?
It's a great question. Absolutely, it's a great question. You're absolutely right. And one of the things, when you look at the budgets for the security services over the last few years, they have increased, but so has the workload. And you certainly had the situation, because of some of the things you've talked about, because of Al-Qaeda as an example, that it meant that resources that were devoted to Russia were cut back. And then we realised on the back of Salisbury that was a mistake. It simply is the case that we need to think about how these services need to be resourced. And certainly when we're looking at defence as an example, we need to absolutely prioritise security within that. And of course, you need to grow the capacity, you need to grow the capability. That can take time. Often there's competition for the type of people that you need, particularly when you're talking about cybersecurity, that this has to be a priority for the UK state or any other state. And I don't believe that we've given the resources to the security services that we probably need to. And from my own experience, I want to commend them for the professionalism and the work that they do. They are an outstanding group of people in the main, but they need to be properly supported to do the job that we need them to do.
On the Official Secrets Act, the reform, one of the things that it's all over the papers, so clearly it was somebody briefing actively overnight, is the idea of having what the Americans have got, and that is, if you want to be a spy in the United Kingdom, you have to register. I mean, just almost, if it wasn't so serious, it would make me chortle. The idea of 007 signing on and saying, I just want to let you know I'm here in London as a spy, or here in Moscow for a spy. But is that the kind of world that we live in now, where people can seriously expect people who are working for a foreign nation's intelligence operation to have to register as such?
Again, it's a good question. And if you think about it, if you think about what happened at the time of Salisbury, not just the UK, but many of our allies were very quick to deport a number of alleged Russian spies. The only conclusion you could draw is that we already knew who they were. We knew what they were doing, but there was an acquiescence in some respect to having them living in amongst us. So yeah. I think that's probably right. I mean, we've got to do the job properly, and we need to know who these people are. I don't think we should have the tolerance of spooks from other countries that we have done. I think that's one of the other lessons.
Well, I mean, you touched, because of course you touched there upon on something that is also an overriding concern, and I've no idea what MPs might or might not do about it, be they Tory, SNP, Labour, Liberal, or whatever. But the days of the great game are over. This is not Palmerston era. This is a totally new world. And you yourself mentioned social media and how things are done. The two guys who allegedly committed the murders in Salisbury were clearly not on any register. The people who were thrown out we knew to be spooks, in just the same way that Vladimir Putin and his chums know who our spooks are in Moscow. That world just needs to grow up and get real, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does. At the end of the day, when you talk about what happened in Salisbury and you talk about Litvinenko, what you've got is, it's not the way of putting it, you've got state terror, and you're right, these are people that came in to do this. It's pretty serious when you can't protect your citizens, where people can simply walk in and poison individuals, because that's exactly what happened in the case in Salisbury.
Yeah.
So,
and as Litvinenko's widow said on television last night, you can't protect a man taking tea in a London hotel.
No, absolutely not. So we need to be aware of what Russia's prepared to do, and of course, I mean, I did mention China earlier. It's a different kind of threat with China, because it's more of an economic power.
Yeah.
Whereas with Russia, what you're really talking about is that ability to have power and influence across the world. It's a different kind of thing, but nonetheless, it's in both these cases, it's threats that we have to be very alive to.
Final question: where do you stand on the dividing line between UK's economic interests and the idea of an ethical foreign policy? Be tough on China or worry more about jobs, investment, infrastructure?
I think, well, look, when you want to have a good relationship with China, China is a world power. It's going to be an increasing one, and we want to develop good relationships with them. But we have to be tough. And I'm afraid to say, for me, human rights, ethical foreign policy must come first. We must be a beacon of standards in the world, and it's important that we stand up for that.
Ian Blackford, good to talk to you, and good luck at PMQs. Should be watching and listening.
Thank you.